Hello, and welcome
Hello.
Yeah, sorry, Lars.
Oh, what an inauspicious start.
And, well, I'm Scott.
I'm Loz.
And so we are Scott and Lars, and no doubt one of our stupid jingles will be inserted at some point here.
The Scott and Lars Show.
And, well, let's throw the normal one in as well. Right. I'm glad we kind of powered through the start there, because we've got to get down to serious business today, Lars, have we not?
We do.
It's
crazy. Sorry, crazy that we've been on this journey, and it seems like a long and rewarding trail. But now we have started the climb towards the Mount Olympus.
Quite, and talking about jingles and stuff, let me just throw in a series of sound effects here as we have reached the top 3. So, well, I mean, I feel like, is there any order of business, Foz, that you feel you need to bring to the table? I've got nothing today.
Most distressing for me recently has been one of my back teeth has decided that it wanted to slim itself down. It hasn't quite happened yet, but there's actually like a fair chunk of the outside, the one sort of side, is coming away, and in the coming weeks, I fully anticipate that's going to snap off and leave me in horrific pain. So that's one to look forward to. And if you sort of listening now and then you're comparing me to future episodes, and you're just like, oh, I like Lars when he was happy. Yeah. That's why.
Well, I was going to say I don't want to sound unempathetic or sympathetic to that, Lars, but if you're saying 3 weeks down the line could be an event, why don't we save it for those 3 weeks down the line when we're going to do our Scott and Loz's dental history podcast?
I'll save my pity for when you're in horrible pain. Yes, like it.
Well, yes and no, I suppose. No, well, I mean, the thing is, of course, this is the final episode in the music series, and whilst we do have a similar format planned for down the line for the likes of like shows and I don't know, maybe even other things, I think we both agreed that it'd be nice to just deviate a little bit and take it into other directions, do maybe a couple of one-offs. I mean, we're taking this naturally. It's taking its natural course, really, as I see it, Lars. I don't know about you. We haven't really convened and hosted many retrospective discussions about how the podcast's going. We've just acknowledged that we're on a bit of a series, as we are now, for at least to the end of this episode. And we haven't really talked about where to go from here. We just both thought it would be nice to take it in a different kind of direction. Unless I'm taking it, you still probably feel the same, Lars?
Oh yeah, sure. And I mean, I think even as though we are, self-admittedly two dicks talking bollocks, I think we've been fairly well informed about what we've come out with. I think for the most part, I mean, I remember back, especially it being quite difficult to talk about certain films without giving spoilers. But I still think that was probably a good idea not to give spoilers. I think if we're going to return to sort of like film and music and that sort of thing, I think that what I'm certainly interested in is almost like songs of the summer, and do like a one-off podcast, like, these are the songs that we like, playing when it's hot, or wait until sort of Halloween time and be like, exactly, summer rhythms, or favorite scary films for Halloween and stuff like that, famous Christmas films for Christmas, that sort of thing. I think that could be a fun little way to sort of dip back in, because we've already sort of done the creme de la creme, but there are so many more movies, films, TV shows, badgers, whipped cream. The world is literally our oyster, and I tell you what, Hughes, I'm ready to shuck it all up.
Talking of whipped cream, I can tell you now that my top 3 albums of all time do not feature Whipped Cream and Other Delights by Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass. Or as much as I love that record. But yeah, I suppose, yeah, I totally agree though. That's a lovely sentiment. And yeah, Christmas films. I mean, Gremlins just came to mind. Let's talk about Gremlins down the line, for God's sake, can we? But
yeah, why not?
But yeah, I think with us doing these series on films, I mean, I'm addressing the listener. I hope listeners. I genuinely don't know how many are really listening, Lars. I mean, Spotify tells me one thing. So I know we've got a couple of people listening, which is great. Well, I say a couple, it's more than that. But what I don't mean is that we're not blessed.
We know there's a couple listening because one is you and the other's me.
yeah. But I don't think we're blessed with triple figures in terms of listeners yet.
No.
Like I say, this wasn't going to go out to a great deal of fanfare. And also because we started with film, but as of this moment in time, it's not a film podcast, is it? So we can't categorize it as such in terms of where it sits on the internet. And I think because of that, we're probably not going to draw in total strangers, to this. It's going to come from friends first and foremost, and maybe readers of my book down the line or whatever. But also, I think just while I don't lose my train of thought from about 2 minutes ago, I'm impressed I didn't actually. But basically, for those who are listening, who've enjoyed it so far, I think maybe, when we've got to the business end of films and indeed music as we are here, maybe we've got like almost a little bit too earnest, and it's hard not to be because of how passionate we are about these. And I wouldn't have it any other way for the record, and I'm probably going to be as earnest as I've ever been when talking about these 3 albums. But I do just want to say, for those that kind of like and prefer the silliness, the sporadic chiming in with stupid comments or whatever, that's probably going to increase tenfold going forward, I imagine, Lars.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Because that's certainly something you and I enjoy, and it's been weird that we haven't done it that much so far.
We're talking about stuff that's so beloved to us. It'd be like, painting your mum up like a clown and shoving her out the door, going, "Ha! Look at her." It's just not on.
Yeah, it's strange, really, that you and I have both withheld from like just chipping in like we normally do in conversation. I think perhaps it's because, as we said way back, maybe near the start of this whole thing, that you and I haven't really discussed this stuff all that much before. So you and I haven't really sat down and had like an epic discussion about our favorite films and things to this level or extent. So as such, I think our respect for each other has meant that we haven't just jumped in with frivolous flippancy when it's felt disrespectful to do so. But there will be plenty of frivolics and flippancy moving forward. I promise you that, ladies and gentlemen. And without further ado, frivolics, is that the right word? Frivolities?
I think frivolities might be the one, but frivolics is that's a new word for you, Hughes. Love it.
Well, I mean, Lars, as much as I can't wait to talk about mine, I equally can't wait to hear about yours, because by omission so far, I've got a guess as to maybe 1 or 2 or something, but I don't know what order. I might be in for a big surprise. Either way, all I can tell you is that I'm thoroughly looking forward to hearing your top 3, and so I will close my lips and let you crack on, son.
Right, okay. Well, I think it's fair to say, from the off, I think there are numerous albums that you could have spoken with quite eloquently and with passion. And being informed about a lot of albums. And for me, I think it's a difference in the way we sort of appreciate music, but it's almost like, I don't want to say it's like a more temporary thing to me, but I want to listen to music and almost sort of get what I want out of it, in the listen of it. I don't necessarily need it. Doesn't necessarily have to really sort of leave any
live on in rumination.
Yes, yeah. I remember a few people who've suggested to me artists, and they're just like, once you go away and you look up the lyrics and you look into what they're talking about, then it's like really cool. And I respect the decision of the artist to make such a dense project like that. But call me a Philistine if you like, but I'm looking for a good time, not necessarily a second job. Do you know what I mean? That's sort of how I feel. I don't want to have to go and research what somebody's warbling on about. I want to listen to it and go, oh yeah, that's good. So perhaps
fucking Philistine.
Perhaps my top 10 might be a bit more lightweight, shall we say, than yours. But
Doesn't
as
make
we
it
head
any less
into
noteworthy or respectable. And
no, well, that's it.
I guess when we get to number one, we'll do a countdown because we did this before. Well, I say you did it. I asked you to do it. Do you remember with the films? And then
Oh yes,
I forgot to do it with mine. So
yeah,
I'll make sure we both do it this time. But we're not there yet. So
we're not. Yeah. So with enough waffling, as we get into the top three, this album, which is Malibu by Anderson .Paak, is an absolute joy. It follows hot on the heels of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, we've both gone Dutch today. I don't know what that's about. With Guardians of the Galaxy being one of those albums where a lot of times I was in the car, on it goes, you're belting out the tunes. It's a good old time. And I sort of then stumbled into the world of Anderson .Paak, and I like a lot of his stuff, but specifically Malibu and the track that I'm recommending to people, which is Come Down, which is just a banger, really. The whole damn album. I don't have too many albums, I have to say, that I can listen to pretty much from start to finish and enjoy absolutely everything. Now, unfortunately, as soon as I've started that, I've got to contradict myself. So there are, I think, 2 songs that I regularly skip on this album, but the rest of the songs are so great as far as I'm concerned. The one song that I do skip is sort of almost like it. I think it's supposed to be sexy, but he's just talking about like how big this girl's ass is and how much he loves it, and I'm just a bit like, I don't need this right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're all having a good time.
Isn't it Al Pacino who's like, she got a great ass? What film? I'm not sure what film that's from, but it's definitely Al Pacino, and it was improvised as well. Lars, you're an Al Pacino fan. You're laughing as if you're not aware of this.
I wasn't expected to go straight into full-on Al Pacino mode, and also someone with some of the greatest like monologues and one-liners in all the cinema, and she's got a great ass.
Well, it's quite a famous line because it was the 30th take, and he improvised it and shouted it for the first time. It's quite famous in cinema in a weird way. But I'm sorry to do my usual thing.
No, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. I apologise because I haven't the foggiest as to what that's from.
Well, I apologise again as well because I haven't the foggiest who Anderson .Paak is. I said there might be a surprise along. I said there might be a surprise along the way in this top 3. And the moment you named this album, I sort of internally went, oh, because I've not heard of this. I've got no knowledge of this. So, I can only do my normal thing of interjecting disrespectfully with something that's irrelevant.
Anderson sort of came about through working with, certainly my appreciation of Anderson .Paak came from him working with Dr. Dre when he released his, I think it's the soundtrack to Straight Outta Compton, right, which was called Compton, the album, which was I think Dre's first proper studio album since 2001, which may or may not feature at some point in the future. We can't be quite sure, but yeah. So there was that connection, I think. Or Mrs. Coggins.
And also, you did a Jimmy Savile impression earlier. Jimmy Savile and Mrs. Coggins inside the first. Where are we?
Jimmy Savile?
Yeah, you went.
What?
You fucking did, mate. You fucking did, mate. I didn't mention it at the time, but I'm mentioning it now. Can we keep Mrs. Coggins and Jimmy Savile away from this moving forward, please?
Yeah. We're both going to get arrested now. I'm just waiting to hear the sirens in the background.
That's right. This won't go live for another few weeks, so we can at least enjoy those.
Yeah, we'll be clinking glasses in Acapulco for the Acapulco. Acapulco. Yeah,
Acapulco. Are you thinking of Acapulco?
Acapulco. Yeah, that sounds like a place.
Yeah,
that's where it's like. Watch the sun go down in Acapulco. I don't know. Mexico. Let's go for Mexico. Wherever Argentina, there's no extradition there, right? Yeah, we'll be clinking glasses in Argentina.
Yeah, all goes and
doesn't have the same ring to it. I'm sorry, I've let everyone down.
Just bognery, just remember the travel restrictions we're under.
Oh, from the sunny shores of Argentina to fucking Bognor Regis. Oh God! I don't know whether it's the heat. You strap in, boys and girls. You're in for a random one today.
Yeah.
So before I wait to be arrested, I might as well continue waffling on. So yeah, basically, was aware of his work with other people. I think he'd done some work on one of the Game's more recent albums. So I was just like, oh, okay, interesting. He's a really cool guy, Once again, it followed on a little bit from my appreciation of sort of Kendrick and his work with like a live band and that sort of thing, which again isn't necessarily the sort of the norm with rappers and that sort of thing. Certainly not, these days anyway. And so yeah, it's so funky. It's so I mean, okay, I'm going to do a little bit like what you've done previously, because as I say, the whole album really deserves a proper appreciation. So the album starts with track number 1, funnily enough, called "The Bird," which is just a really great little opener. It's not too fast paced, it's not too in your face, but it's got a real nice vibe to it, and I think it sort of sets you up for what's to come. Then we go into track 2, which is called "Heart Don't Stand a Chance." It's personally one of my favorites, especially when I'm out in the car and I'm belting it out myself. That is a lovely song.
You can't beat again, a song to do that too, can you?
Exactly. That's the thing that once again I really feel like, and having seen various sort of, I think me and Ace were often watching the Tiny Desk concerts, if anyone's aware of those on YouTube.
Yeah, I recently watched Billie Eilish do that, and I really enjoyed it actually.
Yeah, there you go. I happened to do one with the Wu-Tang Clan the other day, which I was just like, did not expect to see you guys here.
Well, clearly a widespread talent, because I've seen Max Richter do one as well. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
and I think another one I've seen was Mac Miller. He was another one. R.I.P. Bless him. Yeah, we're starting to drift off the freeway once more. So
no, it's cool. Like for any listener, go off and check out Tiny Desk, because you might find one of your favorite artists doing that, and it's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's a much more intimate setting, and everything seems to be like big stadiums these days, and I quite like a more personal setting. Yeah, he's just got such a cheeky grin to him, and he's got such a love for the music that it's infectious. I think that it radiates through his work. And I mean, it's in the one episode of Tiny Desk that he's on, where he references, God damn it, I'm going to kill myself for not knowing the title of this song. But there's one song that he does.
If you give me a clue.
No, okay. I don't think you got any chance, mate. Sorry. No,
none taken.
In fact, okay, we'll leave that well alone, because it's just not going to be good listening. As I say, he's just such a cheeky chappy, and yeah, we're loving that. And then we've got The Waters, which is starting to move more towards sort of soulful than sort of like higher energy funk, but again, that's it's a real mix of album, because there's definitely, like, I mean, there's Schoolboy Q on here, which is one of my favorite rappers, and he very much does a rap verse, and cool. I think there is what can be considered some rapping from Anderson himself, but he got his start, I believe, playing the church organ in his local church. So cool. I always find that quite funny when some of his songs can be quite explicit. It's just like, yeah, you really had to bite your tongue in church, huh?
Is that gospel? Was it? Do you know gospel church in particular?
I would imagine so, but at the same time, I can't necessarily.
I think in America, the Hammond organ gets cracked out in most churches in an incredible way. Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
So we've gone through the Waters, and we've got The Season, Carry Me.
I like it that you're going through things track by track, like I tend towards, because it's really nice. I think it's quite nice to be kind of slightly walked through an album. It doesn't ruin anything at all, as far as I'm concerned. So it's really nice to hear.
Yeah, sure. Well, I say, we've gone into a bit of a more sort of soulful, not quite as sort of upbeat as some of the other songs, and it's a lovely sort of a lovely ride, frankly. So that pretty much takes us through the season and put me through. And then you've got "Am I Wrong" with Schoolboy Q, which is just a great song. I feel so embarrassed. So I'm looking at the titles and just blanking on what the actual song is. I can just I could pretty much, I can remember it all off by heart. But that just goes to show you how much I've listened to this as a whole and not necessarily in their own like individual parts.
Yeah, I mean, you could hear the first second of a song and know exactly how the rest of it goes, but you wouldn't necessarily look at the title on the back of a CD and be able to recall it or associate it as such.
I mean, number 10, for example, is a track called "Room in Here," featuring The Game and Sonia Elise, I would say, that's the pronunciation for that. And I've heard mentioned that he'd done a feature on The Game's album, and it's very, very, commonplace for someone to do a feature on someone else's album, and then they sort of swap over, and it's sort of like a favor for a favor, almost sort of a deal. And it's really, really good, actually. The Game actually takes a little bit of a step away from his really, really hardcore rap persona, and I wouldn't say he's all soft and vulnerable, but for someone who's so sort of affiliated to gangbanging, then it's probably about as close as you're going to get. It's a really, really funky beat, and that's if I hadn't have selected "Come Down," which is for me, it's the track of the album is "Come Down," but "Room in Here," yeah,
I'll listen to
really,
both,
really
man.
funky.
Yeah.
As I say, there's lots of others. We go on to I mean, "Come Down's number 13, unlucky for some, but in this case, very much lucky. It's just a banger, that one. It's something that I came to in the summer, but I think it works in almost any situation. It's also another that I'd sort of stand up for the album. God damn it, the video. Wow. It's another good video, that one. You've got a cool couple of more sort of like reflective tunes towards the end of the album. You've got "Celebrate," which is sort of almost like a black positive track, along with "The Dreamer," featuring Talib Kweli and the Timan Family Choir. Talib Kweli, a famous underground rapper, and famously referenced on one of Jay-Z's albums, where he talks about, if I dumbed down my lyrics so you could understand them, then I'd probably be the same level as Talib Kweli. And some people sort of took that as a diss, but actually he's saying, like, I'm Jay-Z and I'm selling sort of like #1 records, but that's because I'm doing this a certain way. If I wanted to make the music that sort of like I want to, that I would sort of appreciate, then you probably wouldn't sort of listen to me, and I just get ignored. And I think I took that as him speaking up for Talib, that he was sort of, you don't care about whether you're going to be popular or not, you're doing what you think is right, and I respect that, but at the same time I'm going to make this money. So, yeah, okay, yeah, I can see both sides of that. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So really, I do apologise, because I already feel that's a little slapdash. But once more, these choices have not been made at random. And if you can listen to this album and have more than, say, one complaint, like I said, there is that one song which is just a bit weird, where he starts talking about, look at all that ass you got, Other than that, it is a certified banger, straight out of 2017, so it's one of the more recent picks, certainly of mine, and a thoroughly ripping good time.
Love it. That's a great sort of introductory description for a rap album, as far as I'm concerned. I love it. If anyone does have any complaints about this album, as Loz said, well, all I can say as Scott is that the views of Loz do not necessarily represent the Scott and Loz show, and as such, any complaint should be somehow made in writing directly to Loz, if you can find a way to do it.
Yeah, please do, and submit with an address, and see what happens.
Yeah, Likewise with any of my previous picks, because the last three of mine haven't been the most accessible of records, have they? Really?
Well,
so I hope moving forward that can be addressed. I mean, is there anything else you want to say, Lars? There's not much else I can say because I've not heard of this album or indeed this person. So all I can do is, as I've done, write down the names of 2 tracks you mentioned there, which I'll go and check out. And I look forward to it. But I'm afraid that's all
I personally, for you, I recommend put the album on. Track 1, The Bird, let it play. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised.
Well, we're into the top 3 now, and so I have to take your top 3 as seriously as I hope you take mine. And,
Indeed.
And so yeah, I will do that actually. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't even think to do so. So
well, there's definite albums of mine, before in the list and to follow that I might say, yeah, you could pick 3 or 4, and if you like that, carry on. But with this one, I'd say, yeah, go on, just bung it in, son.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. God, have I just taken half an hour to waffle on about that?
No, you haven't, because of course we did the introduction, which I think was about 10 minutes at least. So no, you haven't.
Yes.
I don't think you've waffled at all. What I'll do then, because now the time has come for me to need a pee, and then we'll crack on, if that's all right with you.
Yes, please.
Yeah, boy. All right, back in a sec.
I said, are you ready to rock?
You know what that reminds me of? Very specifically.
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you. It's Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith. The Vekoma indoor looping, not the one you're thinking of, Lars, although the same sample may well have been used. I'm thinking of the one at Disney's Hollywood Studios in Orlando, Florida.
Yes.
Which definitely has that, are you ready to rock? Which I'm afraid I didn't quite do as well as you did. Clearly, Lars can do a better Steven Tyler than me. Yeah, whatever.
Which is amazing when you think we couldn't look further apart without, having a different race.
What, you and Steven Tyler?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I suppose. So
you wouldn't put us together as twins. Let's put it that way.
No, and yeah, that's enough said on that. Just the way you said it just swept me right back to being in an equally humid room to the one I'm in now. To be honest, sat in a limousine waiting to be blasted off at 60 miles an hour, whatever. And that's enough said on that. I'm sure theme parks will come up in a future podcast because they are, frankly, one of the things I'm most passionate about in life. Arguably, even more so than music and film. So, yeah, I say arguably, but they're right up there with both.
Yeah.
So, if we don't get to discuss them at some point, it'll be because I've quit the show because I don't think we're going to get round to discussing them.
Well, I think we're going to almost.
Oh, you can fuck off, mate. I'm sorry, I don't pick up the phone to random numbers anymore. If it's important, leave a voicemail. Otherwise, no. That's my default position. No.
Yeah.
To an unknown.
No, I had one too many of click. We've heard that you were involved in a car accident.
Denied. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. Fine. Okay, right. Hughes, number 3.
Right. Yeah. So, as far as I'm concerned, that there's a significant step up from here. For me, in terms of everything, really, I'd say maybe from. Well, I don't want to do a disservice to. Well, I'll do the countdown later, obviously. But I think from number 7 onwards, there was a bit of a step up for me, and then from there's a step up all the way. But the point I'm making is that number 1, 2, and 3, I think are so cemented as 1, 2, and 3, and I think as far as I see it right now, probably untouchable. I can't. I would love nothing more than for something to come along and pierce my top 3, but I just can't see how it could happen, really. I mean, because they've all kind of been in the top 3 from the moment I first heard them, really. And then even more so after, numerous listens. I think such is my love for these albums.
Funnily enough, same here, really.
Yeah, that's really cool. That sounded sarcastic. It wasn't.
No, I got you.
good. Right. So
That sounded sarcastic.
This album is, I'd say probably, well, yeah, I'd say more accessible than the last three, as I kind of hinted at before. The last three, probably not the most accessible records for many, but I hope I did enough to make people think, oh, well, I'm at least going to go off and give it a try. And those people probably are no longer listeners of this show. But I think anyone could like this album, to be honest, because it's quite diverse and probably has something for everyone, I'd say. But at the same time as being really diverse, it's also very cohesive. And honestly, it's like I say, with all the top three really, and just as much with this one as the number 1 and 2, perfectly written. It's about as perfectly written and as complete an album as I think it gets. And this one's most definitely, I'd say, a concept album.
Right.
It's an album that, I'm doing my usual thing here, I will name the person. There's a clue already. It's an album where I believe this said person who created it kind of recognizes it as perhaps his zenith, his greatest, maybe. The one where all the stars and planets aligned, as it were. And it's time to name the person. It's Stephen Wilson. And the album is Hand Cannot Erase. It's an album, like before, I've said this a few times now, I'd almost say charge your glasses at this point, has this sprinkling of like magic over it that it kind of, I would say, sets it apart from everything else he's done, really, in that respect. And this guy's had a long and fruitful career. I'd say at least 25 albums over all of his projects, I'd say. This guy doesn't sit down, for 5 minutes. He just works.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I just thought you were going to leave it there. Like, this guy just doesn't sit down.
I could have left it there and possibly made my point.
He's got an incredibly tender buttocks.
Yeah, this guy has massive hemorrhoids. No.
Sorry.
No, surely if I just left it, this guy just doesn't sit down. Well, perhaps not for you, but you're special, aren't you, love?
I'm very special.
Most people would have known what I meant. No, this guy is a workaholic and a genius. And well, anyway, let me explain the concept of this album first. So, it's I say concept, right? It's partially based on a true story, and a very tragic story, actually, of a lady named Joyce Carol Vincent, who, she died in her apartment in London. And wasn't discovered for over 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
Like with the heating and the TV still on. Such was her decay, actually, that she was only identifiable by her dental records. Uplifting start. Anyway. But like what makes this story especially fascinating is that perhaps your first thoughts would be of like an elderly lady who didn't have many, if any, friends and family members. And so it could, feel feasible that this could happen. But no, she was 38, just 5 years older than you and I was. And she was popular and much loved as well. But I think, I guess crucially maybe, she was an introvert. And it just transpired that over these 2 years, no one sort of checked on her. It's quite a powerful story. And in particular, I suppose, as well as social commentary on the modern age of social media. But at the same time, only makes it more perplexing as to how this could have happened. I mean, there's a documentary, I believe, on Netflix about this called Dreams of a Life, which I haven't seen yet. But Stephen Wilson did see this and was really struck by it. And I think that is what loosely inspired the concept of this album, which is basically about someone who I think had been hurt a couple of times in their early life and then moves to the big city where they proceed to just slowly disappear. I mean, in fact, that there are lyrics in the first song which say that I can quote virtually all the lyrics from this album. So I'm sure I will be chiming in here and there with lyrics. And here are some that are kind of relevant to what I was just saying right in the first song, which are, you only have to say, and the world will slip away from you. And I think in today's world, that rings very true. But anyway, like the best concept albums for me, that the music tells the story almost on top of and sort of before the lyrics come in. And like the first proper track is quite long and quite uplifting, actually. And as such, it's kind of filled with this feeling of excitement and hope for what's to come. I think maybe as she's moving to the city, I don't know, I don't know if it's explicitly kind of linked like that, but it certainly conjures up that imagery for me when I understood the full story. And it sets up the album very well, even though it's probably not necessarily a standout favorite track for me. I can't even remember what it's called, but anyway, I'm not going to go and search it. It's an amazing song. 3 years older. I've got 3 years older. That's part of the lyrics. I don't know. Stephen, if you're listening and I've got that wrong, I apologise no end. Hopefully, my continued doting upon this album will appease anything.
I think he'll let you. He'll let you off.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, and
you are bigging him up after all.
Oh yeah, I barely got started with that. So, so the next track is kind of much shorter and more concise, and this is, I guess, where this main character, if you like, has maybe arrived at the start of this new chapter. But actually, weirdly, it's kind of reflects on their earlier life. This song and the next one are sort of two of the album's highlights for me in many ways. So you've got the track 3, the title track, actually, Hand Cannot Erase, which is without question one of the best pop songs, certainly that Stephen Wilson's ever done. He's got a very broad palette, as you probably know, Lars, and a big collection of brushes as well when it comes to like what he's done in these various projects. And I mean, he was formerly of Porcupine Tree, if you didn't listen to a previous podcast where we talked at length sort of about this. But when he moved on to his solo work, in particular, well, I think this is his 4th solo album, I think, and all of the first 3 were quite moody and heavy, to be honest. But this album sees the start of him venturing into, I guess, somewhat slightly poppier, more palatable territory, you could say. And it almost finds him perfectly between those two things in terms of his output. And so that the title track is just a wonderful piece of pop music, even though it's slightly rocky and distortionate, if that's such a... I'm just making up words as I go in this podcast. And this leads into the first song that I think he released from the album back when it came out, which was 2015, by the way. And like, this is very much a grower, I'd say. It's called Perfect Life. And I mentioned Dad in a previous podcast and our disagreements, perhaps over these things down the line, which, I mean, I don't even consider disagreements, to be honest, because if Dad actually listened to these albums, he would agree. But anyway, we've both always agreed that this album is Stephen Wilson's masterpiece. In fact, we saw it live together, which I'll come back to that, actually. So, Perfect Life, it sort of ruminates on a past friendship, someone who came into this... it's a female protagonist. I don't know if I've said that yet, and came into her life at an earlier point, had a profound impact, and then was kind of whisked away from her. I mean, the opening lyrics, I think when I was 13, I had a sister for 6 months. And yeah, this song is narrated actually by a female voice for the first time in the album. Not sure who that is, actually, but she talks through this fleeting friendship and sort of all the things it did to change her life. And then it goes into this section where Stephen Wilson's vocals come in, and he basically sings "We Have Got the Perfect Life." It's sensational. It's stunning. It's very simple, really. I think it exemplifies how good Stephen Wilson is at those simple chord progressions. Whereas at the same time, I think, how did he come up with that? He's done this so many times down his career, particularly with Porcupine Tree. Anyway, I've got to move swiftly forward. So this goes into like track 5. And I say move swiftly forward because I feel like I'm going to talk quite a bit about track 5, actually. This kind of breaks up the album. And actually, this doesn't seemingly have anything to do with the story and the concept of the record. It would appear to be entirely standalone. But it's probably the standout track on the album for a number of reasons. For one, musically, it's gorgeous. Probably the most beautiful song on the album. I think most would probably agree. Especially taken out of context, which this song is almost designed to be, really. But I mean, the main thing with this song, and this might be my nomination, Loz, if you want to click your pen and get it ready, I'll revisit this decision at the end. But right now, and also because I think the video is important to this too.
Nice.
Is a song called Routine.
Right. Okay. And
emotionally, this song is like the most monumental kick to the genitals. Like it almost breaks you. It's about a mother who's lost her children, and so it alternates between Stephen singing, but also a female singer who I'll come back to, actually. a different female singer to the female vocalist who appeared before in this album. And I'll come back to this particular female singer because she plays much more of a part, I think, overall in this album. And I cannot mention this album without mentioning her, but I'll come back to it. But for now, let me just stick with the kind of train of thought that I was on.
Sure.
So lyrically, Routine is like I say, it's about a mother who's lost her children, and it's very much about her having to keep this routine in her life to cope with it. I can remember that, like, the lyrics sort of: routine keeps me in line, helps me pass the time, concentrates my mind, helps me to sleep. And the song basically builds and builds very, very slowly, very gently, including one of the best guitar solos I've ever heard. Actually, that makes me want to talk about the guitarist here, but I won't. I'll This is really good exercise in my discipline, but also my retention of, memory here. I'll come back to this guitarist down the line.
I was going to say, you've got some balls in the air already, so I'm impressed that you're still pinning things on the board for later.
Yeah, well, exactly. We'll see how many plates are still spinning at the end. I'm on it right now. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
So basically he wrote this solo and features on the rest of the album. So that's probably why I'll be able to come back to that plate, hopefully, before it stops spinning down the line. But going back to, like, the female input of this song, because after all, it is written from a female perspective and largely sung by a female vocalist. There's this kind of explosion, which, if you watch the video in particular, which is partly why I think I've recommended this track, was like you'll sort of see it happen as well as hear it happen. It's gorgeous, but ultimately a really despairing animation of this poor woman who's just at the end of her tether with life, understandably so. And she like capitulates, she explodes.
Wow.
And this is where actually the female vocalist does as well. So Ninette Tayeb is
she
her
explodes
name. Yeah, she spontaneously combusted on stage. No, Ninette Tayeb.
Sorry, I'm immature, I know.
No, I know. Ninette Tayeb. She's an Israeli singer who was just perfect for this record. And seeing that section live, honestly, again, charge your glasses because bold comment incoming. Genuinely, this was the most powerful thing I've ever seen live.
Wow.
It even beats everything from one of the albums that's to come in my top 3, just in terms of like having seen live in raw power and emotion. I'll never forget it. I know this might sound cliche, or it indeed ingenuine, I don't know, but most of the audience were in tears. Like, I remember looking around at this moment because I kind of wanted to see how others had taken it. I think you'll see what I mean if you watch the video and see it, because there's this explosion of emotion, and then it's followed by this scream that she does, and I've never witnessed anything like it in a live performance. Not so much in terms of like her and the performance of that, everything building up to this moment and that scream and the outburst of it, but also just the feeling of the crowd. Like I said, basically just this total silence where I looked around and I saw like the faces of people, and then the applause that followed, which is like, again, just the single most heartfelt applause I think I've ever been a part of. Honestly, the energy in the room. And this was the Hammersmith Apollo. Just down the road from where I was born. And also, that's not even the end of the song. There's this gorgeous section like after this scream where it has like a few seconds to sort of settle, where this applause sort of happened, and then the guitar just slowly comes in again. There's this gorgeous riff that sees the song out, and then the following lyrics that are kind of repeated over and over again, which again just sort of break my heart, which is basically, don't ever let go. Try to let go. And it just repeats that, don't ever let go. Try to let go. And it's honestly, I guess I'm doing my best job to convey it here and now, but I would say you got to go off and just watch and listen to that. I mean, And even then, you won't get the sense, of course, of what it was like to see it live, because sadly they didn't film that. But it's the most emotional I've been at a gig, and I felt the same from everyone around me as well. So
yeah, I bet that was an amazing feeling to feel part of like almost a collective outpouring of emotion.
yeah, it genuinely felt like we'd all been there for this moment that just like in some ways no one would ever feel again. So it was amazing. But I guess I've said enough on that. I've got to kind of get back to the album here. So we're kind of into the second half of the album here, and I can speed up, I think, a bit from here, because although it doesn't exactly go downhill from here, I think I needed to talk a bit more maybe about those tracks than some of the ones that follow. So yeah, we sort of go back to the story of the protagonist now, because that was somewhat of a departure for that track. And there's a song called Home Invasion, which is kind of where things start to turn and go, the darkness almost sets in. And it's quite a jazzy track, almost entirely instrumental. It's got some sick riffs in it as well, from keyboard and guitar. And then it goes into quite a spacey prog piece, I guess, called Regret 9. And maybe this is where I should talk about the other guitarists on the album, Lars Guthrie Govan. Keep that proverbial plate spinning. He is simply one of the few, like in the world of guitarists, who is capable of like playing virtually anything he wants, as fast as you like, any technique under the sun. But he also possesses like the mental, I don't want to call it ability, because you can't teach it, you know? It's like, I suppose, the emotional understanding whereby he plays the right notes and really tugs the heartstrings. He can do it all. And Regret 9 features quite a long solo, which is a chance for him to like sort of showcase that ability in both directions, I guess. And then I suppose to skip a few tracks again for the sake of time, he does so again later on in arguably the song that the whole album has been building to, which is called Ancestral. And this is one that's threatening to overtake Routine as my nomination, but I think I would still stick with Routine. But Ancestral is one of the most epic things he's ever written. And it has this riff in it, which I guess it kind of represents this crushing like crescendo. You know, it's really dark, it's really epic. It's kind of also the crescendo to the entire album, and it doesn't disappoint at all. It's got a wonderful time signature too, whatever it is. It's just like, regardless of if you're a musician, and I'm sure you'd appreciate this riff section if you were, or someone who just doesn't care about the technicality and just wants to hear something that resonates and grabs you, this would serve both types of person. And this is kind of really where the album comes crashing down, I guess, which it's almost threatened to do, you know, for some like 40 minutes so far, which already over the average album length, I'd say. It's a long album, this. That's why I'm trying to rush through it a little bit. And then it kind of, at this point, after Ancestral, my God, you know, it's a bit like after Routine. You have to just sit there and go. And then it kind of brings in a very early theme back in terms of the music and the pattering of rain, this keyboard and piano section with this beautiful piece called Happy Returns, which is to do, I believe, with a letter she was writing to her brother, kind of at this point where the album came to an end. And we sort of don't know if she ever sent it. Probably not. I personally believe she did die before she ever got to send it, which is kind of heartbreaking. And again, like some of the lyrics in this, I mean, there's one in particular which I know Stephen Wilson really likes, and well, I'd be proud of it if I wrote this. And also it sums up the whole album and indeed life in general. He basically sings, because the truth is, the years just pass like trains. I wave, but they don't slow down. And then finally at the end, the lyrics that make me think that maybe she did die before she ever got to get this to her brother. She basically ends this with, but I'm feeling kind of drowsy now, so I'll finish this tomorrow. And so you don't quite know. It's left with this ambiguity. But then the song kind of floats into the final piece on the album, which is called Ascendant Heron, which I suppose in and of itself may be a clue. It very much, again, sounds like what I would imagine the feeling of dying is. It's very ethereal. There's this feeling of floating away into something else. Like the title states, ascension, I guess. And yeah, this concludes an incredible album, a very long album, or well, at least an hour and 10 minutes or something, longer, significantly longer than average, I would say, but not that outstays its welcome for a second. A very deep story, a very deep experience, I think. Something just really, really special, even by his standards. And I'm sure I've got more to say, but at this point, Loz, I've got to see if there's anything you want to say about this album. Have you heard any of this album before? Because I know you. I'll shut up. Sorry.
Not consciously. Not that I can recall. I don't think. But yeah, that. No, I've always had a sort of almost like an outsider's respect for Steven Wilson, because I know he obviously worked with Opeth as well as doing Porcupine Tree and all that. And as soon as I heard you say this is the most epic track that he's ever done, I was already intrigued, and now I was just like, right, okay, I can tell you now, this is the first album where I've genuinely felt like I need to go off and listen to this. Even if I don't necessarily love it and I don't want it hooked up into my veins and I'm going to get it tattooed across my forehead, I really want to, it's a concept album with a really evocative concept. Obviously, I am aware of Steven Wilson. I think he does manage to encapsulate emotion in his work really well. And once again, I'm not at all confused, but I always, so often I find myself talking about something that brings me ultimate joy. And I'm always interested that oftentimes your picks can be sort of quite bittersweet, or, I know we talked about potentially Steven Wilson getting written off as, he's the king of depressing music and all that sort of thing, which I think is disappointing, really, because I don't feel that he deserves that at all.
It's also bollocks.
Yeah.
And the same goes for Radiohead. This idea of it being solely melancholic is no, not at all. It's beautiful at times. I prefer the term beautiful to melancholic, really. But also there's moments of joyousness or just joy with Radiohead and indeed Steven Wilson. And yeah, I mean, I suppose almost to counter that and negate myself, I would say that my favorite thing that Steven Wilson's ever done, like song-wise, is actually the final track on the album that preceded this album. The album's called The Raven That Refused to Sing. And as I've just said, the song is also called The Raven That Refused to Sing. And again, I think he recognized this as his favorite thing he'd ever done, or the best thing he thought he'd ever written, song-wise. Wow. And that track is, there's no question about it, heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. But I do think it's the best thing he's ever done. It's gorgeous. It's heartbreaking. It's melancholic, but I don't really want to go off down the road of talking about The Raven That Refused to Sing, because I love it so much, but also it's actually impertinent to what we're talking about here.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I suppose. Well, you were talking about Steven Wilson working with Opeth, right? I mean, he's world renowned as a very good producer and indeed remasterer of works. Yes. He's recently done Gentle Giant's Freehand, which is one of my favorite records they did. And he's also a close friend and affiliate of one Robert Fripp we've talked about before. Sort of recognised again the world over for his just astonishing musicianship and one of the godfathers of rock music, if you like.
The Frippster.
And I believe that he once said to Steven Wilson that, like, to him, genius, the word genius or term genius, it is almost like an entity that just, think of it of its own thing that just floats around almost of its own volition and perhaps lands on a certain artist here and there in their golden period, if you like. Well, Steven Wilson said himself that he felt that was the case with him and this album, Hand Cannot Erase, that just everything fell into place. Again, we sort of talking about the stars and the planets aligning. I mean, this happens a lot with artists for me. Artists who I'm not necessarily even a fan of most of their stuff, but they maybe just have one song where it just something clicks. Like, I mean, I can think off the top of my head, Duran Duran, Ordinary World, right? I don't like Duran Duran, but Ordinary World is, as I see it or feel it, one of the best songs ever made. Like, I love that track so much. Couldn't care less for anything else in their discography. and Another artist that I shouldn't like at all, Sigala. Like he did 2 tracks which are like, and I'm talking about sweet love or sweet loving. I can't remember, one of the two, and then Easy Love. Right, these 2 tracks that are just, one of which, by the way, features Jackson 5 being sampled quite nice. But those 2 tracks are like 2 of the most joyous and re-listenable, sort of just upbeat kind of dance poppy tracks I've ever heard. Like, I still can't get enough of either of them. I listen to them both frequently. The rest of his catalogue, interminable shite. And so my point is, sometimes this happens with certain artists or a certain type of music, that things just fall into place for you, even if it's just for a very brief period in their career. I'm a huge fan of everything Stephen Wilson's ever done, all of his side projects, everything. But yeah, this album is the only one that sort of made my top 10. I know that in my kind of honourable festival of mentions that we did, I talked about him and kind of Porcupine Tree, and in absentia just missed out on the top 10, I'd say. But here it is, just so firmly at number 3. And what else can I really say just to round this off? The production's incredible. Of course it is. We just talked about his merits as a producer. So it sounds perfectly crisp, but like organic at the same time. And like I said, I'm just so grateful I could see it live as well, because he does such a good live show and it sounds fantastic there too. And all the more special for being with my dad for it, of course. He's a fellow fan. And so I've got to wrap this up. If that loving depiction I just gave of this album hasn't made you want to go off and listen to the record, then I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And so, yeah, so my nomination would be Routine. If you want something poppy and immediately accessible, you could go with the title track. If you want something heavier or epic, go with Ancestral. But my ultimate recommendation is Routine. And so, yeah, that's final now. Routine.
It's etched in stone.
Yep. And there we go. Right, Losington, we're over to your silver medalist.
Well. Now, these 2 albums very much come as sort of a 1-2 punch. And they are 2 albums that I credit with sort of, I wouldn't quite say sculpting me into the man I am today, but perhaps as a young lad who had a difficult time at school, shall we say, because let's not go too deep into that right now. But someone who had perhaps sort of had difficulty fitting in, and and didn't really see anyone else around him like him. I felt quite alienated in a lot of ways as a younger man, and all of a sudden I remember sort of stumbling upon rap music through, I think it was MTV or something like that. And
can you remember specifically what year or age this would have been? Like, was it? Are we talking middle school here, or are we talking like start of high school?
I would say late middle school, just pre-high school.
Which of course I suppose was before we met, I guess, wasn't it? It was kind of...
Yeah. I say I'll focus more on that perhaps in another podcast, but I immediately sort of appreciated with, especially, most of them, in fairness, this sort of attitude of, I'm me, I'm who I am, I do what I like, and if you don't like it, then fuck you, And it sounds odd that was almost like a transcendent thing for me, but as a timid child who had been sort of heavily bullied, that attitude of sort of these were people who were bragging about selling drugs and sort of pimping hoes and all that sort of thing, which was clearly supposed to be a negative thing. And then they were sort of like, yeah, but look at the jewelry I've got, and look at the money, and look at the bitches. And, I'm not necessarily saying I immediately wanted to be a gangster rapper, but I could relate to that in feeling like I felt like I was an outsider, and I felt like other people were sort of putting me down. And I felt, well, if these guys can sort of glorify their own existence, even if they're not supposed to necessarily be people that you would traditionally look up to, then why can't I?
Yeah.
And it really sort of struck a nerve and became an impetus for me to sort of step forward and be my own person much more. And also, I found at the time that through sharing the same music with other people that other friends that I had, that I saw them begin to sort of spread their wings in the same sort of way. And I thought, oh, okay, this is not just something that's unique to me. It did seem to be, something that was sort of in the air, almost. I think I've followed you too precisely here because without further ado, we're talking about the Marshall Mathers LP by Eminem. And just for the record, we're released on May 23rd of 2000.
Wow.
Now, this was, I think I touched upon briefly earlier, is one of the albums that I had to get it myself. I was so excited, and I was just like, right, okay. I remember even very, very vividly going to buy it from Woolworths. That's how bloody long ago this was. And I dove straight into the car afterwards and sort of put on my Walkman and was listening to it and loving it, and loving every track. Some more than others, but still every track.
Well, this
and
is, I
thinking,
remember, like, no, so I'm so sorry, Lars. No, I can,
yeah.
I can, no. Please carry on. I'm so sorry.
I was just thinking to myself, as much as I'm loving this and I'm sort of nodding my head, I just hope to God that Mum couldn't hear the lyrics clearly through the headphones, because I mean, for example, as much as I love this album, as much as I say, Eminem and indeed Dr. Dre have done a lot for me personally, which might sound odd for two people I've never met, but you know what I mean.
One day.
Yeah, well, that's it. Who knows?
We'll do like a double date. We'll go out for a Thai meal or something.
Yeah. Yeah, two dynamic duos for sure.
Two dicks talking bollocks, and Eminem and Dr. Dre.
Yeah, it writes itself. We do a four-way interview. They can ask us about our podcast, and we can ask them about their fantastic music.
Quite. Yeah.
I think that's fair.
I'd say so.
Right. So even though I love this album, I don't really think. I mean, Eminem actually touches on it himself, where he talks about where were you when little Eric jumped off the terrace? You should have been watching him. Apparently, you ain't parents. And I always thought that was really clever. That this was a time where Eminem was getting picketed outside his concerts for sort of anti-gay lyrics and lyrics that were sort of supposedly glorifying violence against women and all this sort of misogynistic stuff. And again, in one, I think it's more a skit than a track, where he cuts his wife up and puts her in the trunk, and then sort of like kidnaps his daughter, and then goes off to a pier and gets his daughter to help him unload her body and drop her off in the ocean, and sort of like, oh, say bye to mommy.
Yeah, that's Kim Part 1 or something like that, isn't it?
I believe it's Part 2, because I think part 1's the one where he actually murders her, and that's the one song where, as much as I understand, that was sort of an expression of what he was going through, and they've obviously had such a back and forth on and off, and I think they've actually been married at least twice now and then broken up again. I mean, history is littered with these sort of on and off failed romances. I just think there were two people that were destined to never be together, but there was just something
I think
there's just something that kept drawing them back.
I guess it's important for me to just quickly chime in here before I lose my train of thought, because you're talking there about the abrasion, almost the controversy of some of the lyrics, and I think Eminem kind of reveled in that, but at the same time, I don't think it necessarily came from a place of genuine like darkness and hatred. I think it was his means of channeling that kind of stuff, and it came out in quite a really interestingly real and visceral manner. But at the same time, there was this element of kind of, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm to be honest with you, I'm thinking more back to tracks off the Slim Shady LP, which maybe were a lighter take on the same mental standpoint, if you like. And so as such, I don't necessarily want to go down that avenue. But I think Eminem did to a degree relish like the controversy of some of his lyrics, but just as a lyricist, incredible. And I don't want to talk any further. This is your album. I love this. I went through a big phase with this album too at high school, probably not quite so much as you, but I loved it so much. And that's why I want to shut up and listen to you talk about it, because it will bring a lot of it back. You know, I can't really remember. I can only remember certain tracks, which I won't even name because I'm sure you'll probably will do at some point, and I'd rather let you do so. But I love this album, and I'm fighting to shut up at the moment.
Yeah, no, thank you. So as I was sort of talking about the content and the controversies, I mean, I have to say, as much as I enjoy the album, I don't think listening to it will sort of make you want to go and kill somebody or murder your wife or any of things like that. I must admit, I remembered working for HMV over Christmas once, and a very nice elderly couple came to the till, and they said they were looking for a Christmas present for their grandson. And I said, oh, yes, okay. Was there anyone specifically or, you know, anything in particular you were looking for? And she said, well, his mother said that he likes Eminem. I said, right, okay. Eminem's a great artist. Good choice. However, you know, what sort of age are we talking about? And she said, oh, you know, he's sort of about 13, 14. And I said, oh. And they sort of looked at me a little sort of funnily, and I said, look, I said, you know, I know kids these days, they grow up quite early and all that sort of thing, but, you know, I'd hate for you to have purchased something and then be sort of horrified later about what it actually, you know, has within it, sort of thing. And I said, so like I've said here, you know, I don't think Eminem is certainly, he's expressing himself, and if his self-expression includes sort of things that some people find vile or offensive, then as much as I can understand that, I still don't think that was his number one thing in terms of how he set out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do think you're right. I do think he reveled sometimes in the controversy, but I don't think that was his aim. I think it just, he always said, as you know, as like you know, the Americans have the freedom of speech, and I think he always said, you know, why am I any different to anyone else? You know, I use my freedom of speech to express myself, and you know, it must strike a chord with people because people have bought it, you know, by the millions, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, what right have you got to say that I can't express myself this way just because that I'm successful? You know.
Yeah, and in terms of him acknowledging or recognizing the success of, let's say, the Slim Shady LP beforehand, I think, excuse me, I think Eminem had like the mental and emotional intelligence to also realize that this stuff is a means of from the listener point of view, channeling negative energy. I mean, in that sense, people like to complain about GTA, corrupting the minds. That's just utter bollocks. And anyone with any intelligence knows that. I would celebrate the fact that games like GTA exist because it's a means for people to channel negative energy. And even Linkin Park, you know, there's all sorts of, you know, Linkin Park was an album where, I mean, if that hadn't existed back when I was at that age, full of teenage angst, it would have been, well, I don't even want to kind of speculate on like where I would have been if I had not been able to find something that allowed me to channel that in a safe and comfortable way. And I would definitely put the Marshall Mathers LP in the same light. I mean, I remember sort of the darkness and bleakness of the cover, you know, and it is definitely an album with dark undertones, but that's not to say it's evil or it promotes darkness. I would say far from it. I guess that's...
Well, it's a little bit like I remember hearing that in Germany, they tried to ban the sale of sort of like the WWE wrestling games and stuff like that, because a young man had gone out and he'd beaten a homeless man to death using wrestling maneuvers that he'd learned from the game. And, even though there was this movement for it to be banned, they went into his room and found that he had also had sort of Call of Duty and numerous other titles where you could kill people within it, and it was successfully argued that you could beat someone to death with a rolling pin. Does that mean that we've got to outlaw baking? Do you know what I mean? Like, one does not necessarily predicate the other. I think,
yeah, exactly. As Stuart Pearson says in an episode of The Thick of It, if someone chokes on a packet of crisps, would you issue an arrest warrant for Gary Lineker?
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
But
I mean, this is almost like the album when we're talking about Eminem. Certainly for me, I've loved a lot of his work for a long time. But I mean, as much as do I feel like it's aged particularly well, songs like The Real Slim Shady, I mean, you only really necessarily need to hear that song once to sort of to recognize it. You know what I mean? But that song was massive.
I like the
fucking everywhere.
of that. Yeah, I love the bravado and sort of not audacity, but just
apparently that was the first song that him and Dr. Dre recorded, because apparently Dre just played him at the start of the sample with the badao. I'm not going to do it justice, but yeah, apparently he saw Eminem just immediately sort of high, and built on that, and he was just like, no fucking way.
Well, that alter ego sort of thing, you mean?
The fact that he just like within 30 seconds had slipped straight into the hi, my name is what? My name is who? My name Chicka Slim Shady. And I'm not saying obviously we had all of it right there, but when we're talking about, as I say, I mean, I don't have the facts and figures right here, but surely one of the biggest selling singles of that year, if not the decade. It was everywhere. The video was everywhere. All the different references in the video are hilarious. I mean, Eminem dressing as Britney Spears and entering into hip hop as a white guy in a sort of predominantly sort of black entertainment form, and sort of famously misogynist as well. And then you're cross-dressing in your sort of almost like debut single. That's why I think so many people, they've got Eminem wrong, because they
took the pomposity really at face value without being willing to afford a shred of artistic merit behind it, and maybe a reason for wanting to do it in such a manner.
Yes.
I mean,
Go on. Sorry.
No, I'm so sorry. No, the single and video I always think of is one that's elsewhere on the album, which is well, I'll just say it, Stan. I'll let you talk about Stan.
Yeah,
that's the one I always remember. But no, sorry, I'd much rather sit back and listen to you talk about this album, because I love it so much, but I obviously want to hear you talk about it.
Well, I'll say I just wanted to finish off about The Real Slim Shady, just because I thought it was fascinating the way that's when Dre said that he felt that he knew he had someone special to be working with, because they'd finished the song that got released as this like massively high selling single. I think he said within about 3 hours. It's just ridiculous. And Dre being such a perfectionist as well. And he also, famously had said, Eminem talks and says things that make me uncomfortable and makes me want to listen still. And he was just like, that to me is the sort of the calling card of a really great artist, that you can make music that's provocative and still works as good music, even that if that's not necessarily your sort of point of view. And I think Stan is obviously another great track, and again uncomfortable, and I think it has to be said, Eminem obviously come from such a difficult background. I think most people are aware with him not having a father figure around, his mum living in a trailer, getting evicted. I think she'd got Munchausen syndrome, so it meant that she was constantly taking Eminem to the doctors and like feeding him or poisoning him to give him certain side effects, so that she had a reason to go to the doctors. And like as I say, I mean, Eminem himself explores a lot of this stuff in further albums. So if you're not so full up on it, then keep listening to Eminem. Is all I'm going to say. You know, you won't go far wrong. Uh, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and you were talking
I
about
think
like the
if you,
relationship between like Eminem and Dre as well, and I think
yeah,
that's really interesting that there was this instant connection because I think, well, I've talked about this before as if I'm an expert, but just this is how I feel, you know, from
mm,
having listened to rap albums down the years and also kind of my understanding of how they were conceived and then, you know, made. The producer is especially important, I think. And so to hear you talk about kind of Eminem and Dre and like this symbiosis
mm,
that meant that an album or a track, you know, could come out this quickly and this naturally, and for there to be this kind of shared feeling of like, wow, okay, this is something that's amazing, and I can, you know, almost hear that in the record without even knowing that that was the case. It's just
mm.
such a strong album.
Oh yes.
It's another album that I look back on, you know, my sort of early teens, the formative years, and but I can swipe nostalgia and sentiment aside and listen to it now and go, no, that was a fucking great album. If that
Mm.
came out now and I listened to that now, I would feel like it was just as fresh as it was back then. And I'm
And
so
I
glad
say
to hear it
they
ranked
do
so
have
highly.
a really like interesting duality, Eminem and Dr. Dre, because Dr. Dre had such a sort of a turbulent career with, you know, blowing up with NWA and then the sort of giving you the short version, realizing that they were all getting shafted on their royalties and stuff by their manager, and sort of walking away from that situation to sort of founding Death Row with you know, Suge Knight and Snoop Dogg and numerous other, and Tupac, of course,
Yeah,
and that whole situation where Suge Knight, the label manager, had almost sort of taken the whole thug life thing too seriously, and apparently there were artists coming in to do recordings for their own company, and they were being beaten up or assaulted, you know, by these gang members that are essentially just like hanging out in the offices because Shook Knight felt that it was important that if they were going to be the gangster label, that they had gangsters there. But you know, it's almost like Lord of the Flies in a little way. You know, utter chaos. And when somebody's street rep was getting in the way of the talent actually being able to record their music, then I think you can understand why, once again, Dre very bravely chose the option to sort of walk away. And I think he had to give sort of a contribution from the records that he next released. One of them being Dre 2001, which is a spoiler alert, is what we're going to be talking about in a minute.
I thought you were going to do a
You know,
Godfather 1 and 2.
yeah, exactly.
Well, I suppose you inadvertently did this a while ago, but yeah.
I'm afraid I did. But yeah, he was at the point where he'd founded Aftermath, which was the label, and Eminem was sort of this sort of scrappy, scruffy, mainly sort of underground freestyle sort of battle artist. And apparently, when Dre first heard Eminem, he thought he was black, and he had never given any thought to what ethnicity that he was. He was like, "This guy is ridiculous. You know, I've got to work with him." And then as soon as he turned up, he was just like, "Oh snap!" I don't think he then realized, you know, he's obviously seen the reception. I mean, unless you're sort of Vanilla Ice and you're almost like playing it for laughs or going the mega mainstream route, then he knew immediately he's going to have to have worked his ass off to get respect from the streets and the sort of the hardcore hip hop audience, and he did through his own hard work and dedication and craft. And I think they're both of them are perfectionists, and I think that's something that's really helped keep Eminem on the sort of the straight and narrow in as much as you can, coming from such a turbulent background as he had, and all the personal problems that he's gone through. I mean, you know, I think you and I would attest. I think all of us, in some way, shape, or form, we all go through our trials and tribulations. But I think you have to remember at the time, Eminem shot to such a ridiculous level of fame at such a young age and I think for the most part can look back on his work and his interviews and statements and what he did with a fairly clear conscience. And I think that has to be a sort of a thumbs up of respect in his direction, because they've even got, is it the 23 or the 27 club they talk about with the celebrities, including Amy Winehouse, who'd all died at a certain age.
Jimi Hendrix.
Oh
God, the singer from the Doors. Oh God, I'm so embarrassed I can't remember his name, but I can remember Jimi Hendrix.
Jim Morrison.
I'm sure he died at 27. I nearly did.
Yeah.
And I think about, like you say there, young. I'm going to call them musicians because I'm thinking of two in particular here, and I know it might sound like a quantum leap from the likes of Eminem, but you're talking about just achieving a stratospheric level of fame at such a young age. And think back to what you and I were like at the age of, I don't know, 20. But so there's two names I've got in mind here, and I'll quickly mention them. Right, one's Miley Cyrus. Right, now think what you like about her, but I've got great respect for her. I guess from two things. One, I saw her cover Fleetwood Mac's Landslide in a lovely way, and I just felt that she had genuine love for that, and indeed that kind of music, and that she's largely been pushed down a certain avenue by those around her. And that brings me to point number two about her, which is there's a Black Mirror episode which is largely about the music industry, and she plays a character in that, and it's fantastic. So I've got, again, big respect for Miley Cyrus actually over that. And the other one, believe it or not, is Harry Styles, because I saw him cover Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer recently. And again, say what you like about his decision making wardrobe wise, I loved the cover that he did of Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer, and I felt that there was a genuine fan of music there, and that he's just, again, probably just largely been funneled down this avenue, and who, that level of money surely corrupts to a degree anyone. And so to go back to Eminem, I can't imagine what it would be like for him to have just, from his humble beginnings, and of course anyone that's watched 8 Mile will see a kind of reenactment almost of that. For I assume it was probably the Slim Shady LP, was it, that really shot him into the stratosphere? I can't really remember.
that was the first album.
Yes, but wasn't that enough to kind of make him really famous, or was it the Marshall Mathers one that really made him?
I would say that because he'd had Infinite, which was sort of like his underground album, and then that was sort of had got him attention, but it wasn't necessarily sort of big time,
right?
And that's it. That I was talking about My Name Is earlier. Hi, my name is, and I apologize. That's actually off the Slim Shady LP. So that was his big sort of breakout single. But for me, it's the content in the Marshall Mathers album that really made him a star. I think that and like a lot of times, they always say that everyone's got one good album in them, and that's personally how I felt that at the time that the Slim Shady LP had been sort of written off as a sort of that's great, he'll never do it again. And then the Marshall Mathers LP comes out with some really interesting and notable sort of features on there. I mean, Bitch Please 2 towards the end of the album, with Exhibit and Snoop Dogg and Nate Dogg. God bless Nate Dogg. Every time, love Nate Dogg. R.I.P. once again. There's a lot of different styles, and it's quite a mature album in a way. It can be immature in some of it, but
well, he'd be shedding all of his
massively contradicted.
Well, no, I mean, because look, you're the kind of expert, if you like, of the two of us here. I was at one point, most definitely, and or most deaf, if I want to tenuously bring another rapper into this. No, I kind of weirdly, I can remember more off the Slim Shady. Like there was that, I never meant to give you mushrooms, girl. I never meant to bring you to my world. And now you're sitting in the corner crying, and now it's my fault.
It's my fault.
Weirdly, I can remember stuff like that was more light-hearted and flippant, I guess, if you like them. The stuff that was more heavy hitting on the Marshall Mathers LP, and subsequently, I can't wait to go back and listen to that because it had such an impact on me at the time. It'll be like going back and listening to Hybrid Theory. There'll be so many waves of nostalgia that wash over me listening to that.
And I mean, one of the epic things that I always loved when people talked about Eminem being a homophobe, and he got Elton John famously to do the Dido part of the chorus for a live performance of Stan at the Grammys. And there's the Elton John's like, my tea's gone cold, I'm wondering why I got here to bed at all.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's such a genius way. And I think Elton even kisses him towards the end, not on the lips, but still. And it's just like, yeah.
Do you know this? Elton John is Eminem's sponsor for his sobriety and recovery.
Yeah.
Again, it just, this sort of thing transcends genre. We talked about the best films transcending genre, and I truly believe the same thing of music, if not more so. And this is why you see these things like, I mean, you've got, on the one hand, you've got people that might do it for money purposes, like when, say, Limp Bizkit brought rappers in. It could have been for artistic merit and just again the love of just music holistically, that hey, let's collaborate, let's have fun, why should you be over there and me be over here, let's come together. But then there have also been artists musically that have probably come together purely, sadly, for the purpose of extolling money, for like bringing two fan bases together. But so Eminem and Elton John being great friends is so warming, to me, and these things happen all over the place, but that's just one in particular I think of that's just fantastic. I love both artists. Elton John won't feature in my top two, but whilst we're talking about him, I love his first 4 albums. There's one called oh god, what's it called? Madman Under the Water. Got Tiny Dancer on it, and Holiday Inn and Indian Sunset. And anyway, we're going way off road here. The original point I was making was valid. Can we all just remember that, please?
Yes. No. Yeah, I think they do actually have a genuine friendship, which I think is hilarious and quite apt. I feel like we've almost gone on too long on this one, because if you haven't heard it already, what have you been doing with yourselves? It really is that big of a record. He's such an evocative storyteller. I think really so much of the work, it speaks for itself. And I think if you actually listen, Eminem does really speak to you. He certainly spoke to me and left a lasting impression. And I think that's certainly true with you and with multiple others that I know. It's whenever I think of what's a good album, this is always certainly either, again, this could easily be sort of replaced or swapped in and out for Dre 2001, and I'd still be just as happy. But for me, as much as I love this, Dre 2001, certainly the way I feel at the minute, just pips it for just being such a fantastic album. We'll get to that.
I'd probably say I love both equally. Maybe a little bit like Godfather 1 and 2. And so, well, Loz, you've played all your cards now, son.
I have.
Yeah, so let me go for a quick piss, and I'll get on to my number 2, shall I?
Yay!
Yay!
Take a pee every day.
End of part 1.
Chip, chip, chow.